Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today, I'm joined by somebody that I've been following for so long, I don't even remember when I stumbled across his Twitter account, but I've known him for quite a while, and I am so excited to finally get to talk to him. I have the creative director for Unbreakable Publishers. You might know him on Twitter as Death by Mage, but he goes by Jacky in the real world. How are you doing today, Jacky?
I'm doing good. Excited to be here.
I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. You and I actually met at one point a couple years back during the like an Orlando Tabletop Roleplayers like podcast meetup that everyone
Mhm.
did, and then I never made it to another one again.
I know. It's so weird because I still talk with some of those people. The D&D Raw podcast crew and I. We go up to Gen Con. We went to Gen Con like twice in a row. We ended up staying together quite a bit. So I've gotten to know them very well over the years.
Yeah, it's always funny whenever I see people on Twitter and they're like, "Oh, I live in Orlando or Central Florida," and I'm like, "Well, dang! Like, there's so many of us all close by," and it's
Mhm.
like, I was really looking forward to doing meetups, and then it's like, up, no meetups for quite a while now. Yep.
Yeah, I know. And there's some people there's actually a few TTRPG people living south of me too, because David Floor, Brain Clouds, they did stuff for like D&D 4th edition, and they live down in Fort Lauderdale. And then there's Newbie DM who also is down in Miami. So there's a bunch, and Anthony Joyce actually comes from Fort Lauderdale, but he lives up in like the Central Florida area. So
Okay.
it's amazing how many people are from Florida in that space.
It is something. It's always nice to be like, "Oh, hey, I know you. You're in Central Florida. What?" Like there's one person that tweeted out Brutal Dan,
Oh
and
yeah.
I was like, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going somewhere to write," and I'm like, "Oh, I know where you live." Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay."
Yeah, it's really interesting whenever you find content creators or creatives that are from Florida or that live in Florida, and you realize, wow, there's a lot of us here.
So many of us,
So
so many of
many.
us. We're going to be talking about tabletop role playing. We got the last half section of this podcast carved out and ready for it, but Jacky and I like a TV show that is really good and doesn't get enough love on this podcast in particular, or I don't see it around a lot, and we're going to talk about it. And that is J. Michael Straczynski's Babylon 5, which aired for 5 years plus, spin-offs and movies not movies in the sense, but direct to TV movie type stuff. And Jacky, how'd you get into Babylon 5?
Oh man, so we're talking 2000, and this is like a young teenage Jackie stumbling on the show, just channel surfing, back when people actually watched TV and dealt with that. And through my channel surfing, it was one afternoon I got onto TNT, and then I saw this sci-fi show because at the time I was a big sci-fi person, so I love sci-fi shows. I loved anything sci-fi. So I saw the show, and the episode I remember was it was an episode. Oh, I okay. So the episode was this was around season 3, and the Narn were basically the homeworld for the Narn were taken over, and there was a rogue, there was a derelict ship that escaped and managed to hide behind Babylon 5 for repairs.
Hmm.
But then the Centauri found out, and then they sent a battle cruiser, and that was a nice big fight because they weren't happy about a Narn warship just sitting there. And that was a great episode, and I love the tension of that whole episode. And then I just stuck around watching it, and then I got to enjoy the rest of the series through syndicated repeats. And so I think I must have gone through in my teenage years at least 5 to 6 like cycles of syndication reruns.
It is absolutely something when I look back on that time period, and being able to, there's you channel flip, you watch the guide, you're like, okay, what am I going to watch? What am I going to stumble on? And that's how I watched so much of the movies or TV shows that I got into, was just air, like so many times they'd be airing or on like syndication and reruns. And nowadays you don't get that. You don't get that because you got just, let me go to the streaming service and pick what you want to watch, and there it is.
Yeah, like the discoverability is kind of lost nowadays. Like most of the time, if you're looking for like a streaming service like either Amazon, Netflix, or Hulu, like half the time you're just relying on like the brief description and the whatever cover image they use to hopefully pull you in, versus like that era of when you would channel surf and you would just stumble upon an episode that somehow hooks you right in, and you end up enjoying it, and you go, gee, I hope I get to see more of this, and I hope I get to see more reruns of this. And because back then cable programming or even regular television programming dealt with reruns, and they do like short seasons of reruns, so it was great to do that, and I miss those sometimes.
Absolutely. And I remember I got into Babylon 5 because our gaming group, we would start gaming at like after our college classes were done. So probably like 4 o'clock ish. But
Hmm.
there was one member of the group, and he was adamant. He's like, at this time when Babylon 5 comes on, we're taking a break and everyone's going to watch Babylon 5 or sit through it or whatever until the 2 episodes are done, and then we'll resume the game. And so we'd be like in the middle of like a combat or whatever or adventure, and it's like, oh, it's time for Babylon 5. We have to shut it down to watch it.
Yeah, and so I will say I unfortunately had almost nobody in my age group watch Babylon 5. So I spent the majority of my teenage years and young adulthood where almost nobody I knew had ever watched that show. And it would take so many more years before I finally meet other people who did.
I had only heard about Babylon 5 before the gaming group that happened. I'd only heard about when that and Deep Space Nine was coming out right around the same time. And there's articles about like, oh, which one came first, and they're stealing, and all the discussion
Mhm.
about it. And we were talking before we started recording about how both shows ended up having like great casts, and diverging from what could have possibly been like, stepping on each other's toes to have completely different shows. But it was it's a show that I've found myself going back to more often than not when I'm like, you know what, I just need something where I know it's good. I know I'm going to have, great stories told to me.
I will say that for Babylon 5, so like Babylon 5 is definitely that, like one of those earlier heydays of sci-fi political intrigue dramas, because it just and it did it in a way where it was very tasteful and at the very same time very inspiring, because like J. Michael wrote a lot of that stuff based on his own secular views. A lot of it's inspired from that, and there's a lot of philosophy in that show that I really genuinely just adopted when as growing up. Like I really love it so much. Like it shaped so much of my growth and my way of thinking, and it made me open to thinking about other things. So I really do owe that show a lot, because it really opened my mind to a lot of other things and allowed me to explore things, because the show has big central themes about like those big metaphysical questions, like who are you, what do you want, where are you going, and and as you know, those are the most frequently asked questions in that show. And for anyone who's listening, like those are those are big questions, because in the final episode where Susan Ivanova has that monologue at the end, it nicely wraps up why those questions are so important. And it really makes you realize how important it is to have that sense of self and actualization, and how empowering it can be.
You know, when you were saying that, it was like an instant flash of, I know which character's saying that. I can hear the voice saying that. You're saying it, but I can hear that character's voice in my mind, and I'm like, yeah, I know exactly where Jackie's going with this.
Yeah. And I think for any diehard Babylon 5 fan, it pains you so much when you rewatch it because deep down you all know how many of these actors and actresses are already passed away, and it really saddens you every time you watch it again.
Oh gosh, there was I know Jerry Doyle passed away a couple years
Mira
ago, and
passed. Well, Mira just passed recently.
yeah, and I was like, I sent the link to my friend. I was like, I can't believe that this many cast members of this show, like it's not been that long, but just
Uh, David, think about the dinner scene at the final episode of the show. There's only two living members on that table now.
that is so hard to believe. And it's incredible to hear the stories about like their lives and everything, you know,
Mhm.
post Babylon 5, and especially and I cannot remember the actor's name. Sheridan. It might have been
Oh,
Sheridan, where like Bruce.
Bruce.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Whereas like they didn't talk about anything about what was going on with him until after his death, and then they came out and they're like, here's what was happening, and here what was going on with him, and I was just like,
Are
I
you thinking
can't.
about George O'Hare, who was Sinclair?
Oh, it must have been him then.
Yeah,
Uh,
because George actually was suffering through some
yes, yeah,
mental
yeah,
health break. He actually was starting to lose a lot of cognition through
yes,
his later years, and so that's why he had to leave after the first season of Babylon 5.
yeah. It was
And
Sinclair, yeah,
yeah, and then and that was like something that not a lot of people knew until like literally he passed away.
yep,
Because J. Michael promised not to say anything until he passed,
yeah,
and and the thing is too, like, the funniest thing is, because I always, when I recommend the show to a lot of people when they first watch it, they always tell me like the first season is a little rough, and I said, well, besides the budgetary reasons, I said the show was also written for George O'Hare
hmm,
because George came from a background of crime detective dramas, and so Babylon 5, if you look at the way it's written, is written more like a space period crime drama with a little bit of political intrigue in there. And even if you watch the intro, it's even portrayed that way.
yeah,
Uh, because Garibaldi's character was done that way too. But then once they moved into season 2 and they brought in Bruce for Sheridan as a character, that's when the tonal shift changed. And now, granted, J. Michael still planned for that kind of change, but he originally had kind of planned it more for like Sinclair as a character. But because of but they had to make changes.
yeah,
Which is fine. And I think it really changed a lot of the story too, because it made it much more action oriented. Because Bruce came from a background, because Bruce at that time came out of Tron, and so that was very very action oriented. So he had enough experience to do with that, and it kind of carried it in the weight for the show.
yeah. It's like I'm looking at the character, like all the people for like a cast list right now, and just like it's just incredible to see how many are gone. But
Yeah, it is one of those things for like if you're a diehard Babylon 5 fan, and even if you're a new Babylon 5 fan, when you start looking into it and you realize almost a good third of that cast are no longer here, and it
mhm.
starts hitting you a lot harder, especially for some of the powerful emotional scenes in that show. There are very few punches that are ever not there. That show just hits you hard every time. There's always something meaningful and philosophical in that show, like that when you listen to it you just go, oh wow. I think recently I showed a friend a clip, and it's Jerry Doyle's character Michael Garibaldi, and this is also again right after Narn had just been conquered by the Centauri. So Jakar, who was the former ambassador of the Narn people, is basically trying to gather weapons and armor, weapons for his people to be smuggled into his homeworld, and he's using the station as a kind of a middle place. And obviously, they don't want that to happen because that becomes a hotbed situation, and it could lead to losing their neutrality. And so Garibaldi has to eventually have a formal sit down talk with Jakar and say, look, I feel for you, I understand your plight, but understand this: if you send weapons here, everything goes to hell. And Jakar's like, we're already in hell. And Garibaldi's like, I get it, but if we lose that neutrality, it hurts you and your people more. And Jakar eventually kind of goes like, all right, I promise I won't have weapons come through here at all. And Garibaldi then just gives him like a data crystal that is like that for a contact of his that will help smuggle in weapons in a very remote section of space. And Jakar's like, why are you doing this? And Garibaldi is just very casual about it. It's like, well, the guy owes me a favor, and I figured this is the best way for us to be even, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. And Jakar's like, no. Why are you helping me? And like Garibaldi's like, well, because ultimately I usually know how conversations are going to end, but I leave some room for disappointment because, and that was one of those things you realize, wow, for somebody who knows so for anyone who doesn't know, like Garibaldi's character is that he's very meticulous and he knows how to read people very well. And that's just part of his job as head of security. Now, because Garibaldi knows how to read people, he has a very uncanny instinct about reading people and knowing how they react. And so Garibaldi kind of going, yeah, but I leave a little room of disappointment, which kind of like always signifies like how the nature of other people, they tend to just ultimately go against their better nature. And the fact that at this moment he's pleased that Jakar actually listened, and this is like, okay, this is something I can give you that now we can resolve this and help you. Like basically it's kind of opening that window of you want to be helped versus you just lashing out at everything and I can't help you if you're lashing out. And I think that was such a meaningful scene just for that. And I mean, I can always talk more about any scene with Wayne Alexander portraying Sebastian or Lorien because those are some of my favorite ones. So Wayne Alexander is an actor who's had multiple appearances in Babylon 5, and there's two characters he's only ever played in that show, but they're two of the most powerful characters in terms of presence and impact. The first time you see Wayne Alexander is he portrays Sebastian, who is this human who's been brought over by this very enigmatic encounter suit wearing race called the Vorlons, and Sebastian is here to test one of the principal characters, Delenn, to see if they are ready and capable of handling this upcoming war that they're setting up for. And so Sebastian is like this Inquisitor, and the title of the show is Here Comes the Inquisitor. And basically Sebastian is like literally this Victorian era like British man who literally just has nothing but sharp wit. And every time I think back to that scene where Delenn is literally being interrogated and Sebastian starts the question of, who are you? And Delenn is trying so hard to answer the question because the first thing she does is she states her name, which the Inquisitor is like, I already know your name. That's not what this question's about. Who are you? And Delenn hesitates now because that she doesn't know what the question is supposed to mean. And then she starts falling back on things like her lineage, her titles, the things that she's described as, and eventually she gets punished for it by having electrical shock. And Sebastian's like, how can you the fact that you don't know who you are, how do you expect others to fight for you? And you're just like, oh, wow, that hit me hard. That hit deep. And I think that is definitely one of my favorite ones for Sebastian. And then for when Wayne Alexander came back for Lorien because because everyone loved Wayne Alexander, and so Wayne came back for several more episodes as another character called Lorien. And Lorien, I think my favorite scene for Lorien is when it's the episode Into the Fire. It's when Lorien talks to Susan Ivanova about immortality, and there's this piece of dialogue that always resonates with me. And so in the conversation, Lorien talks about the fact that he was the first being that ever existed, and like Susan's like, I'm kind of skeptical about that, and Lorien goes, well, skepticism is the language of the mind. What does your heart tell you? And Susan goes, my heart and my mind don't really speak to each other. And he's like, yeah, I noticed that. And which is a nice little quip. It's a nice little quip. And then eventually Susan's just like, but there's no way you could have possibly been like, discover fire, invent the wheel, discover an immortality serum all in one lifetime. And Lorien goes, no, I was already born immortal. And she's like, there's no way. And she's like, and Lorien goes, well, those of us of my race who were first, we were. And then the universe, and he goes into this postulate of like, I think the universe for us to appreciate life had to be short and to make changes. And he says then the races who followed they ultimately would grow old, infirm, and die. Eventually, like, he talks more about the other races that he and his people met. The fact that, like the Vorlons, and then the entities known as the Shadows, and all the others, and then he goes into this bit about, well, ultimately some matured and went away, a lot of others just died off, and he goes into saying like they've all lived too long, and they've all seen too much, and ultimately, you realize that things like love and companionship, they're transitory of the moment, and they ultimately will turn to ash. That's his quote. And then he says, those whose lives are brief are capable of dreaming that love can be eternal, and that you should embrace that remarkable illusion. And that line, the delivery for that scene still hits me every time.
It is something where we are talking about a character that shows up very briefly, especially Lorien's character, where he's there, but he's not like one of the main cast. But we're talking about characters that deliver lines that still affect people, affect you. 20 plus years later now. And
yeah,
it's such an incredible thing for a show to have that impact on a person, not just from their main cast, but from just the stories that they're telling and through the characters that they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you have like great villains in Babylon 5 too. That's the other thing too. Like, and these are characters that you just love to hate, but they also have this rich level of depth to them. Like, I will say for like DS9, I will say they didn't get to do that as much because they only had really one central character that was ultimately a villain of depth, and that's like in DS9 it's like Dukat, which ironically there's another character in Babylon 5 named Dukat, but we will get into that. But like so in Babylon 5 there are the equivalent of thought police. There is the Psi Corps, and in the Psi Corps there is Bester, and Bester is definitely that kind of sleazy character that just, not only is he a very powerful telepath, he is manipulative, he sneers at everyone, and he has like this overwhelming sense of I'm above everyone. And you can't help but hate him, but hate him in a good way. Like, you just love to hate him. And the funniest thing is, the character was also supposed to be a one-off, but people loved Bester so much. J. Michael brought back Bester multiple times throughout the entire show, and that is still one of those other things. Like, that's one of those bits that you can enjoy so many good characters because they have they have such powerful delivery in that show, and they come back multiple times because of it. And it is absolutely wonderful because you get to see a lot of actors and actresses who come back multiple times throughout that show, and they bring so much to they bring so much of that setting and that world, a lot more characters and a lot more depth and also variety. And I think that's what's great about it.
Now, out of curiosity, because again, so much depth for the characters, do you have a favorite? Is there one that you land on more often than not, or is it more of a I like this handful of characters?
Oh man, it's very hard because they're also written well. But I have to say, if I were to pick my favorite, my favorite, if I had to pick a favorite character, or at least a group of characters, it's definitely Londo and Jakar. They're the best married couple ever. They in the very beginning of the series, they are adversaries and political rivals, and then they turn into full hard war rivals. And then like that show had the greatest amount of character development for both characters, both separately and simultaneously. Especially near the end when the characters are seen together more often. And they have such an amount of growth together, and even the fact that their eventual end has been prophesized in the very first season, in the very first episode, might I add. And so you know how their relationship is going to ultimately end because the show has already has basically told you this is unchanging and it cannot be changed. And you see it hinted at in multiple places across the show, and yet ultimately it's a tragic way to go because you think about how the show, they give you one last scene with both these characters together, and it's like the most emotionally charged scene because throughout the show they've done terrible things to each other, both their people, themselves, and they ultimately reach a point where that scene, it's the final scene with Londo and Jakar, and it's right after Centauri Prime has been bombarded and everything, and Jakar, like Londo tells Jakar, you have to leave because we are going to be doing something drastic soon, and unfortunately, I cannot be allowed to have other non-Centauri around me anymore. And Jakar, gets up and talks to him a little bit, and then there's this touching scene where Jakar goes, tells Londo, "Look, I can never forgive your people for what they've done to mine. My people will never forgive what your people have done to them. But I can forgive you." And that's and especially forgiven, if you were to sit and watch through that whole series, you can never not be at fault. You can never not blame Jakar for ever having any animosity. Especially given their track record across the entire 5 seasons of the show, where they're at each other's throats 9 times out of 10. And for them to have Jakar reach this huge, pivotal spiritual growth of forgiving Londo was so powerful. And then Londo literally almost at the verge of tears, just because there's this moment where there's somebody he genuinely, after all these years, had arguments and fought with, but still respected to a certain degree, and then coming to this fruition of mutual understanding and respect for each other, and us as the audience knowing the hard sacrifice that Londo is about to make, and that is how ultimately how very tragic that whole scene goes, because it's both beautiful and tragic because we know that Londo is about to make a huge sacrifice for his people, and ultimately be condemned in a position where he will be in the future very powerless.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we also know how ultimately they will end as characters, because it's been prophesized, it's been hinted. There's even a scene where their end is shown
Mm-hmm.
due to time travel, shenaniganry, and and that is what makes that scene beautifully tragic. And I think that's one of the great things about the show, is that J. Michael knows how to write beautiful tragedy. Like, it's because when some scenes you'll just go, that is beautiful, but at the same time you realize this is also tragic, because you've given it a foreshadow across the show, some scenes where you go, oh, that is not going to end well. And it's one of those things, like, and that is why the last episode where there are the parting of it's a parting, because at the end of the last episode, there are characters who are because it does a little time skip, and basically everyone in that table are characters who've basically survived, air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're honoring the memory of these other characters who are not there with them, which is ironic because more than half of that table now has deceased. And you realize how much the show carries that weight of, like, there is endings and there are partings, and it's important to remember them. I love this show.
I was like, I could listen to Jacky talk about this for, at least another 30 minutes to an hour, but, I know we're going to be talking about other stuff too. So I will say that if you've listened to Jacky talk about Babylon 5 as passionate as he has for the past 20-ish minutes at this point, it is on HBO Max, and it is a well worth watch. It is, 5 seasons. I don't know if they have the movies on there, but you don't need them. You can just watch the show and really enjoy it and get into it and see if you can answer the questions, because sometimes those are hard questions to answer about yourself on some of those questions.
But they are very important questions.
They are indeed. I want to talk about, before we get to tabletop role playing, we got another topic that we're going to talk about, and it's on Netflix, and it is a new, I guess. You equated it to before we started recording how BBC did Sherlock, like a modern updating retelling of the story, but this is for Lupin, Arsène Lupin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's Lupin on Netflix, and if you at least enjoyed the idea of the BBC's modernization of Sherlock, you will like this. You'll like this Lupin much better, because they do. It is a French production, so Netflix France actually did a production for it and everything. So it is done it is situated in Paris mostly, and at least for the first 2 seasons. We don't know what the third season is going to be like, because they already greenlit the third season. It is very short. The seasons are about 6 episodes long. Each episode's about an hour long, roughly. But it is a modern retelling of Arsène Lupin, and it is for me, by far, it is a really nice adaptation. One, because there is a person of color as the lead, which is really fantastic, but also they do touch on, like, you still have that gentleman thief suave, and there's so much about it where, like, Lupin has a family as well, while also dealing with being a gentleman thief. They also tie in they do reinforce a little bit of Lupin's backstory to give it more depth, because the character Lupin is not actually named Lupin. He's actually a normal person, but he adopts the moniker of Lupin to commit these basically dastardly thefts, because for revenge initially. And you find out through the course of the story that Lupin actually is trying to find out who is responsible for his father's death. And he finds out that the person who hired his father years ago as a chauffeur basically framed him for a crime, and ultimately to silence his father, they killed him in prison, which is also and to make any story complicated, this Lupin also had at one point been a paramour to his former his father's employer's daughter, and there's like this whole there's this whole dynamic about it, and then they also do a little touchstone of like Lupin's backstory to how he met his wife, and and everything, and the heists really do feel like a classic gentleman thief style of heist. There's a lot of disguises, there's manipulations, there's forgeries and everything, but it has a modern take on it. So there's things like using the internet and using technology as well. So you get that nice element of modernization, but also being able to kind of feel like as if you're watching a stage magician performing. And I do like that. I like that a lot. The heists were really fun, but then when you started getting into the meat of the story, then it got really good. And I think that helped really carry it forward. And I like the fact that there was a lot more motivation given to Lupin in this story to kind of solidify it.
Yeah, that show, like when I saw it pop up on Netflix, I was like, "Oh, let me put this on my watch list." And then, as one does, never watches it because that's how it works out. But like I had such a love for the character because I remember being introduced to Lupin through Castle of Cagliostro, which
Mm-hmm.
classic animated movie, and then when I lived in Japan, it was always like an ever present like my Japanese counterpart for English would always talk about Lupin and the characters in Lupin. It'd
Mm-hmm.
always be a thing, and you always see it on the internet. You're always like, it's always like an ever present fandom, like character. The group of characters are always there, and it's like you kind of learn about it, but then you never see it, you never watch it. But then when I saw it on Netflix, I was like, dang, I need to watch this.
Yeah, especially part two. They start basically forming the basis of the crew finally. Because in the beginning, it's only like one principal character is there, and then by the end of the second season, they brought in another character, which gives me a lot of hope for the third season when they introduce the rest of the crew. And I think the way they left off with season two, at the end of season two, that season three, yeah, they're probably going to bring in the rest of the. They're going to start introducing the rest of the crew, and that's going to be really something to look forward to.
Well,
Um,
I'm excited.
yeah, and Japan has a really deep love and fascination with Lupin, especially the concept of gentleman thieves, which is why they came up with their own term, which is phantom thieves, and that is a big thing. So if you're a big fan of Persona 5, like that is why phantom thieves are a thing. And like, I mean, they have so many variants of a phantom thief in Japan in terms of the anime. My favorite is, if you're a fan of Detective Conan, there's a side character called Kaito Kid, and Kaito is usually a term denoting being a phantom thief, which is the Japanese take of what a gentleman thief is. And so, like Kaito Kid, I love Kaito Kid as a character. I love the little side manga that's there. I love the anime series that came for it. But unfortunately, Detective Conan is more of a better seller. It's one of the mangaka's longer running series. So Kaito Kid just gets put on the wayside and only gets like a couple updates every so often when he needs to take a break. And I'm just like, I'm just like, which is funny because there's a few other series and franchises where the creator, I'm more a fan of their side content more than their main content that they're known for. This for Sword Art Online is the same way. So the creator of Sword Art Online created also a side series called Excel World, and I love Excel World more than I love like Sword Art Online. And Sword Art Online took off, so the mangaka is more focused on Sword Art Online, and I'm just like, I'm never gonna get an update for a while, all right. So yeah, but I love Lupin. I always loved Lupin. I ended up reading some of the books when I was younger, but I will say I do love the show in terms of what it does and what it represents, and I I don't know. I'm a fan of modern takes on like classical literature. I'm not opposed to those sort of things. Some people are, not me. I always like to see the spin. I always just like to see what can you do. That's really what I say. It's like, what can you do? What can you do to make it different?
Exactly. Keep, what can you do to keep it or to make it different, and but then still keep some of those like themes that everyone knows and wants to see in it. And
Hmm.
I'm excited to dive in. I'm gonna have to move it further up my list now. My list might be a little bit longer, but
It is very bingeable because they don't. So unlike I will say that it's much more action oriented and it's much more packed together. So like there is the pacing is very much like a jog. Like you're feeling like you're in a jog all the time. And so when you get through like one episode, you're like, I need to know what happens next. I gotta know what happens next.
yeah,
So
that
it's
that
really good.
I'll have to make sure that I've got a clear couple hours to get through it and not have any interruptions, so
Yeah.
I can watch it.
Yeah, and season one ends with like a really like a solid cliffhanger because when I first watched it, I went through all 6 episodes and I went, and then they end on like this ridiculous cliffhanger, and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait a while. This is gonna hurt. And then and then when they finally aired season two, I was like, I need to know what happens. So like the day of, I turned it on, watched it right away. I was like, I gotta know how you resolve this, and it was just it was great. It was worth it. And then I finished the whole second season on the same day it aired, and I'm just like, I'm okay. I'm okay with this. I'm upset that I already finished this, and now I have to wait again. But I'm here. I'm here for it. I'm happy for it.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I love shows when they do that. Like I'll curse them. I'll be like, I can't believe you let me sit like that. And then it's like, oh, next season. Okay, let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, I will say though, I'm not used to the new formatting though, where a lot of the Netflix series now though are doing in parts, and they're doing like 6 episode parts, and I'm like, this hurts a lot, Netflix, because I binge really fast and now I have nothing
I
afterwards.
I know I just watched the new Masters of the Universe, and it's like five or six episodes, and it's like I know there's more because they've told me that more is coming, but to leave it like where they did, it's like I really hate you.
Yeah, like it's a new thing I've noticed a couple of shows on Netflix, like especially Netflix originals, and I'm just like, this hurts a lot.
Hmm.
Netflix, this really hurts a lot. Like this is, I see why you're doing it, but this hurts a lot.
I'm right there with you.
I hope they don't do that to Stranger Things 4. That's really what I hope.
Oh, I will not be happy if I load up Stranger Things and there's only like 5 or 6 episodes, and I'll be like, you shake my
Yeah.
fist at you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, Jackie, we're going to get to the meat of this thing because I know that I had to have followed you on the Twitters for tabletop role playing, because it's primarily what you talk about on there and what you do and what you're working on. How did you originally, before we dive into what you're doing, how did you originally get into tabletop role playing? Like where did your journey start in the world of TTRPGs?
So it's like probably back in 2004. I had a friend introduce me to Dungeons and Dragons third edition, and before I even got to play the game, he made me play through Neverwinter Nights to get used to like the setting of the Forgotten Realms, which was not a bad way to at least learn the basics of the game. And then I finally got to play my very first campaign, and it was a level 20 campaign that led into epic tier.
Oh my
so
gosh,
I
that's
so 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 I
something.
never had it simple when it came to my D&D introduction experience. Like I played a level 20 cleric of Kelemvor, and like we went through this we went through this campaign that lasted like a whole school year, and like ultimately I got to kill Cyric, and I got to become a demi avatar. It was great. I mean, we it was that campaign was really the first foray into TTRPGs for me. And then when I got into college, I met a lot of other people who played other TTRPGs, and that was when I got introduced to World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade and things like that. And actually, for most of my college career, I was in UCF in Orlando for like probably 2.5 years, and then I ultimately came home to finish the rest of my collegiate work. But I will say that I spent at least about almost a year and a half in a LARP on UCF campus, and we played Vampire and we did Mage and we did that. So I was playing 2 nights a week from 8 p.m. to 1 to 2 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking like full get up, full dress, LARP, which is, for anyone who doesn't know what Florida weather is like, it's awful. And
Yeah. Yes, it is.
and so you're talking about a person wearing like a heavy trench coat or a heavy anything in 92-degree weather in Central Florida, where there's no ocean breeze and only swamp, and you're just like, okay, I hope I can live through this.
That is so funny because my close friends, when they went to UCF, which is back in like 97 to like 01-ish or so, they also did World of Darkness LARPing
Mhm.
on campus and around the Orlando area. And it's always just it's something that is really cool about, like, at least, from when your time was there and their time was, that it's like an ever-present thing, was
Yeah.
like live action role playing.
Yeah, and most of the people I've met, I'm still friends with to this day. We still talk about our games every so often, and I I definitely enjoyed playing. So I got introduced. So I definitely, out of all the World of Darkness systems, I definitely fell in love with Mage the Ascension,
Hmm.
uh, and I definitely loved Vampire still. But Mage is always going to be my bread and butter, whether it's Ascension or Awakening. And I did love Changeling the Lost a lot. And then when I was in UCF, I also ran the largest campaign ever, because it was literally 16 players, 16 to 20 players on a weekend. And so we took up like we took up like multiple tables in the UCF marketplace, and we were there for like 12 hours,
Hmm.
once every other week. And we played all day until closing, and we ran like a long campaign. So like I introduced a bunch of people to tabletop role playing games. At the beginning, it was D&D, and then I've spoken with a few people over the years, and they've actually gotten to other TTRPGs, which is great. And then after college, I actually didn't get to have a whole. I didn't really have a group of friends to play for a while, so I ended up taking up most. I was actually more frequent in play by post forums,
Okay.
and so I did that for several years. And so and because of the nature of play by post forums, you can be in like eight to 10 games and
Oh yeah.
never feel overwhelmed, because it takes forever for things to get uploaded and people to respond. So I played a lot of different systems. It gave me a great opportunity to explore a lot of different systems, rule sets, settings. So like I remember the early days of when Fate was around. I played Mutants and Mastermind. I played Star Wars Saga and D6 Star Wars.
Hmm.
I played a lot of different systems in that span of like 3 years, 4 years. And it was a great experience. Unfortunately, like most play by post forums, most of them never finished because of the nature of of how play by posts are.
Yep.
So I think there was like very few. I think there was like maybe three games that I've ever fully finished from start to finish. Almost everything else never finished. I remember I remember playing a lot of World of Darkness systems online at that time too. And then pretty much like by 2011, I kind of took a break from TTRPGs for a while. But I always kind of like proliferate. I always heard news of things coming and going, but I kind of I just had my life at that time just took over, and I needed to do some things, and I kind of just didn't have the opportunity to play again for a while. And then D&D 5th edition was announced, and then that's when I came back. So like 2014. So yeah, that was when I came back, and so I've been back since.
Well, I do want to make a mention to one of the games that you played, and because I have a deep fondness for it, even though we didn't get to play a lot of it back in college, was Mage, and
Yes.
I really feel it takes a very certain kind of storyteller to run Mage, and like you've got to like our storyteller totally outside the box with thinking and creating like way more than any other like role playing game I've ever played. Is somebody that can run Mage is just somebody that is like constantly creating in their head.
So I will say that for Mage, there is a skill ceiling for the storyteller because it requires you to be very open to a lot of possibilities and to
Hmm.
not really limit the imagination. Because the rule set for Mage is already pretty vague, and to a certain degree, there are certain parts of it where it's a little bit more finite, but there are a lot of elements that are kind of open to interpretation, and it does require somebody to kind of be very open to like ideas and be willing to expand on those. And it is definitely the true test of improvisation, if anything, um into leaning in on those sort of things.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of feel like it, I did the play by post similar, dropped off once my kids were born. Definitely was like, I don't have any time. I'm still looking like my desk, I can see like all my role playing books lined up of the ones that I
Mhm.
still have in my possession at this point. And I'm like, one day, and I've tried to introduce the kids to tabletop role playing, and let me tell you that my two sons are the most antagonistic towards each other. Like one
Mhm.
of them's like, how can I shoot a fireball at him? And it's like, no, you're supposed to be working together. Like you're a group that's supposed to work together, not like trying to kill each other.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that like one of my cousin, she just turned 17 recently, and she's known for like a long, like for the last 7 years, like I've been doing this and I've been in on it, and like she's told her friends about the fact that now I'm a full-time TTRPG writer, and I've written for like different publishers and stuff like that. And I'm this like weird cool older cousin that like whenever they get to like see me, they're like, oh my god, it's Jacky. And um and it's also really weird too because like it's one of those things like I've actually met people before who've like either said to me, I played your game, or I've read your stuff on your blog before, and I'm going, wow, I know there are numbers to represent these things, but I didn't actually think they were real.
It's like the random person that emails me is like, I listened to your podcast episode. I'm like, I never hear like I don't get feedback. It's like for somebody to be like, I listened to something. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's one of those things like when you actually get feedback, you're always there's that caution of like, okay, is this gonna be good or terrible? And then once if it's like meaningful feedback, you're just going, okay, I really appreciate that, and wow, someone actually listened, took the time to give me feedback.
Right? Now, fifth edition brought you back into the tabletop role playing game fold. And what happened? Like did you just start playing or did you like
So yeah,
transition?
yeah, so at that time, so between in the interim, I had like a group of friends that never played, and a few of them knew I used to run D&D games in college. And years later, there I always said to them like, one of these days I'll run a game for you. And then between the interim of 2011 through 2014, I started getting to the tabletop board gaming hobby, and now I've invested a lot of money into that hobby. It's a very expensive hobby. And we played a lot of games, and we introduced like these kind of role playing elements because some games really do support that kind of thing because they have their own internalized story. And ultimately, when fifth edition came out, like a couple of my friends had heard of it, that there was a new edition of D&D coming out, so they asked me like, would you be willing to they asked me if I would be willing to run a game for them, and or a campaign, and I said sure. And so it was me dusting off my old DMing shoes because I hadn't done that in like ages.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember we ran we ran in my campaign setting because I had notes for my campaign setting dating back from my college days still. So I was like, let me scrounge up a story to fit for my campaign setting and go with that. And so we started that campaign, and it lasted for about 4 years. And it was a great time. They still love it. Um, Still talk about it every so often. But it was their very first time experiencing the game and playing it, and it took over their lives. It took over their lives really quick. I the So much so that for Christmas one year, they built me my own DM screen with like a built-in dice tower and everything made out of wood. So yeah, they were very invested. They built it for me so that we could use it for our games. So that was very, very touching. Um, we haven't played in a while, our group, but we did try to keep playing through the pandemic. But there's been a lot of people, a lot of them been moving around and stuff, so it's been a little bit difficult. But at one point, we were playing like a sci-fi western game before the right around the time of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, they love it. They miss it because like every so often they'll message me and saying we miss playing, and I'm like, I know, but you're all busy and I'm busy.
Now, what are some of your favorite systems or settings that you enjoy, either reading about, running in, because I know there's so much out there now, and it's wonderful to see how much is available to people when 20 plus years ago there's not so much.
Yeah. I will say one of my favorite. So this one does require people being face to face a bit more, but I do love Dread so much. Dread is a tabletop survival horror RPG that instead of using dices or anything, it literally uses a Jenga tower. And basically, whenever you have to resolve an action that might seem questionable or involving risk, you have to pull from the tower, and that tower gets shaky as you keep playing, and it builds that tension. And when that tower falls, the person who last touched the tower, their character basically suffers an ending. It could be, character death, or they get absconded, or they run away. However it fits your narrative. But it's a survival horror, so there is that inkling of hope that that you hope that you make it through. And I remember the very first time I ran Clue for my friends. We made it into a LARPing thing, so like everyone dressed up, but obviously there was more sitting because you have to you have to basically manipulate a Jenga tower. So there's not a whole lot of movement allowed. And then that became a regular theme in my play group, where every Halloween, every time around Halloween, we tried to do Dread. And so I would go through the effort of writing out invitations, writing out the questionnaires for their characters to fill out, and and that was really a great joy for me, for all that theatrics. And I love that that Dread as a game can be molded and adopted, especially nowadays, because now the Jenga tower, besides Dread, has basically morphed into other things. Like there's Alex Roberts' Starcrossed, which is basically also uses a Jenga tower as part of the mechanism, but it deals with romance, forbidden love specifically. And so it's a great narrative tool. And then now Chris Bassett adopted some of the concepts of well, not Dread specifically, but of other games similar to it, and molded it into now what is called the Wretched and Alone system, which also deals with a tower, but also includes a finite bit of prompts using a small set of cards, usually playing cards, so it's easier to fit. And you basically go through certain prompts, and it's a solo experience. It's a solo journaling experience usually, And then I adopted it for a more multiplayer experience. But it's GMless, and my one of my games, Haunted Memories, is basically inspired by like it Chapter 2 mostly. And
Okay.
so instead of one single tower, you take the Jenga tower and split into two, and one tower represents the present, one represents the past, and basically you can manipulate the past and the present through your narrative prompts. Um, but and so there's a lot of different takes on it, and I know one of the creators for Dread, Epidiah, was working on like splitting it even more into like 3 towers out of the generic 1 Jenga tower. And so there's a lot of versatility that can come out of that. And then I think for me, I like when the mechanics for the game are non-traditional randomizers. So like for most tabletop games, it's always things like dice or cards, or even coin flips and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with those. I still love dice. I still love cards. I still love coin flips. Like any kind of randomizer. But I love when the game is more very narratively impacted. So, and also utilizes like things you wouldn't expect to add to the game in terms of context. So like Dread was one for using a Jenga tower. And another one for me would be 10 Candles, which uses candles. You still have dice involved in 10 Candles, but also the structure of the story, the stages of the story are defined by how many candles are lit. And so each time it really adds that atmosphere. And I think really for me, I really hone in a lot on games that really uh, try to emphasize that kind of theatric and atmosphere.
I've never heard about 10 Candles, but I'm fascinated just thinking about it in my head about having to light candles, and it's just like it gives it a certain, like, I don't know the word, but I feel like there's just something that seeing a candle lit and seeing something going on, and just like a physical representation of what's happening in the story is incredible.
Yeah, and the candles act as also the way to end the game, because once the last candle's like blown away, the game's over. And and so basically your pacing of the story is defined by the candles. And it is in while Dread is survival horror, 10 Candles is tragic horror, which means that in that genre you're all guaranteed not to make it. That is a fact. That is a fact. You are not going to make it. But your characters need to still have hope. You want to play your characters as if they have hope. And so that makes it a very interesting dynamic. And plus, through the storytelling of 10 Candles, your characters lose bits of themselves along the way.
I'll have to look into that more, just so that way I can get some information about it, because it just sounds incredibly fascinating, and then also sad. Like, goodbye, people.
Yeah, I love that I love that system a lot. I remember I played in like 3 games of it, and like you really want to lean in on that tragedy. And
Mm-hmm.
that is one of those things that, like, if you love the drama, that is definitely a good place to do it. Like, I think it's like, if you ever think about some of those horror movies where literally everyone ends up being dead or suffering a tragic end, like that's that kind of horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has that feeling of it, versus like Dread has that more traditional, like, at least somebody hopefully survives this.
So, on top of running games or
Hmm.
playing in games, you are actively now creating games, publishing games, not just stuff for like Dungeons and Dragons, but also like your own games or for other works. How did you get into doing that, and what are you doing now?
So I remember way back when I was still running my blog. I don't really run it now. But my blog, I was writing stuff for talking about like how to incorporate the Fae into your D&D game. And this is like early days of 5th edition, so there wasn't a whole lot of support material for like the Fae and the Feywild. And so I was kind of trying to created like a nice little article series of like things about the Fae, and they took off really well. Like the audience took those really well, and I decided that maybe I should take some of this information and also more and act and expand on some of them and build and write my own supplement. And that was right around the time when the DMs Guild creator content program started, and so I saw a lot of early adopters getting their feet into it and learning a lot about it. And so I waited. I initially waited, and I wanted to see how it looked and how to do what would it take. And eventually, I decided to just go ham into it. Um, and the thing is, too, I think you might remember, David. Journeyman was actually in one of our get-togethers, and
Yeah.
that's how.
Yep.
And that is how I got my cover for Journey into the Feywild, was meeting Journey on that, and then that's how he did my cover, because I talked about it, and then he said he would do it, and I commissioned him for it. Um, and so and people still talk to me about that cover all the time, and I'm like, yeah, because Journey's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yep.
and I know a few people have hired Journey over the years too, so like I'm happy for him. Um, and I miss him dearly because he's a very good friend. We talk like once in a while. I even did work. I even was like their editor for one of their products that they try to bring out, which was God Killers. So that was really fun to do and fun to collaborate with. And then pretty much afterwards, I started seeing other creators who were like looking for like collaborative work to get-togethers and working together to do a project together. And then that's how it kind of started for me. I got to do Artifacts of the Guild, and then I got into Uncaged with Ashley Warren, which was probably the biggest thing for me because it got me into a lot of other future projects, from just the fact that creators who know each other or worked with each other, if they like your stuff, they'll be like, hey, would you be interested in working with me on another project? And that's kind of where it kind of led from there. And after a while, I was mostly working on a lot of collaborative projects on DM's Guild, and then I was starting to expand outwards. I wanted to do a couple of my indie ideas and indie projects, so like non-traditional concepts. And so I started branching out, and then I started offering my services as a freelance writer and an editor. And then next thing I know, I remember having an email. I met some of the people in Paizo, and then during Gen Con one year, and I got an email eventually asking if to do freelance work, and I did. So I actually ended up writing 2 deity entries for Lost Omens, Gods and Magic. So that was like my very first pretty large publisher credit for me. And since then, I've been taking up other gigs and working other jobs. And then life started taking a thing of its own, and then I started to form a small publishing platform with 2 of my good friends, which is Unbreakable Publishers.
That is something where, like, going from, obviously you're working your blog and then shifting it to DM's Guild, and then just getting to branch out into like the collaborative projects and working for, like it's like those little solid steps of, like, you took the first step and then there's the second step, and it's just wonderful to see and hear, because I remember when you were doing your blog, and I
Yeah.
remember like the articles you're coming out with, because I pulled it up earlier today. I was like, oh, I remember the gastronome. Like, I remember you talking about the gastronome.
Yeah, that
And
was a long time ago.
yeah, and like that's how long, I've been at least following you, and we've been talking about it, or at least, me
Mhm.
hearing about your stuff, and it's awesome to see like the progression, and like where you are now, and like everything that you're doing in the tabletop role playing space, because it's like, dang, like, just seeing how far you've come is incredibly like wonderful to me.
I think one of my favorite moments was in most recent memory was so I remember way back my very first very first interview anywhere, because I've never done other interviews before, was with Nerdarchy. And Nerdarchy Dave reached out to me to do to come on the YouTube channel and talk about my blog, what I do, and just kind of geek out and stuff like that. And then years later, like probably about almost 3 years later, I got reached out by their PR person, Doug, and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in coming onto the show, talking about Unbreakable and stuff like that?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I wouldn't mind coming in for that and talking about other things and talk to Dave and geek out again. It's been a while; we haven't seen each other since Gen Con." And it's very surreal because when we were on our pre-show, I was like, Dave, it's been this X amount of years since I was here, and I'm like, man, to go from a blogger to to almost being a publisher and also still being a prolific writer, it's like, what a wild growth spurt that was. Yeah, like I sometimes forget that it's like when I think back to Unbreakable. So Unbreakable Volume 1 came out, April of 2020. So 2017 is kind of when I started making my first big break into doing publishing in terms of create self-publishing and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, 3 years? How did I get here in 3 years? So, it was definitely, I think that was when I had that second chat with Dave on their channel, and I kind of went, wait, this has only been this many years? What? and then realizing that so much has happened in that short time, and yeah, it's wild how much has changed, because I've seen a lot of other people come and go in terms of the creator space, and I've seen a lot of friends who used to do podcasting who don't anymore, or and stuff like that. Or I know people who still are doing their podcasts still to this day, like you. It's surreal. It's really amazing to see how much people have changed and grown over time. And sometimes I feel like I don't I to me, because I'm doing everything, I don't feel I don't see it initially, and then when I finally take a moment to step out of it, I kind of go, oh, I've done a lot.
Yeah, you just I pulled up your itch page and I was like, oh, Jacky's done a heck of a lot. And then you pull up the drive-through page and you're like, hey, look, there's even more. It's just this.
Yeah. It's very. I forget how much I do after a certain point. I think I literally lost track around 2019. I kind of around 2019, the entirety of 2019. I kind of lost track of what I was doing. And then when I finally got to take a breather in 2020, I went, oh, I did a lot.
Now, what is just for people that are listening? What is Unbreakable? What is Unbreakable Publishers? What is going on with that?
Sure. So Unbreakable and Unbreakable Publishers, it is Asian owns voices stories told through the TTRPG medium. And we wanted to have a platform to allow Asian creators to tell their Asian stories, because in a lot of parts of the TTRPG space, in the industry itself, there's a lot of Orientalism and Asian erasure, and also bits of racism. If anyone's been keeping up with the discourse, or even just looking into there was a Huffington Post press about it, and talking about the Orientalism in Oriental Adventures from back in TSR's time, and how that it is still something that's being sold and still propagating harmful stereotypes about Asian people. And so even before that, I had wanted to do something that was very Asian focused for a while. And so I wanted to do something like that. And then when we started bringing in contributors, we ultimately decided that we wanted to do something that was more representative of our experiences. And so we ended up coming up with being an Own Voices anthology instead. And we then also decided that to move it into Drive-Thru RPG. So we put ourselves in the D&D 5e open game license instead of on the DM's Guild, which gave us a lot more ability to be flexible and be able to tell the stories we wanted to tell. And we launched that, and then so we spent a good solid 8 to 9 months working on it, in terms of getting the contributors to write and then get the artists in and get the edits in, and then publish onto Drive-Thru. And and really that is and really for me the goal of the platform was to, one, bring in the Asian voices and have our representation heard, and then also to give a platform for Asian creators to have a stepping stone to get the experiences of the industry to a certain degree, have experiences with the industry so that they can have a chance to come into it more. And especially since, they would have something like a publication credit, and that's so much more, that's so meaningful to a lot of up and coming creators to have the ability to say that I worked on something that was published.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to give that space, and we wanted to also, and one of the things that like we inherited from Uncaged also was, because myself, Jazz, and Caroline were all alumni from Uncaged, and so we wanted to also bring in the means of having royalties for the creators, and help them build. Like for me, I wanted to help them build this kind of platform where also it could provide some means of passive income for these creators one day.
Mm-hmm.
And so and because that's how I have achieved my level of success, air quotes, and through passive income, through my royalties, and then also supplementing it with freelance gigs. And so I want the same for my creators. I want the same for others to have that capability to have that bit of steady income. And so I want to grow, and so that's my goal. I want to give them the opportunity to do that.
For you now, as creative director for
Mm-hmm.
Unbreakable Publishers, what is on the horizon? And then I know you said the goal is like to have like the passive income, and get the publishing credits and get the voices heard, and get their stories out there. So what's on the horizon for Unbreakable? And also, what's the toughest thing about being in like your shoes, as far as being in the TTRPG space as it is? Because you and I both frequent Twitter. Is
Yes.
kind of where we both live, and we know what's generally going on in the TTRPG space for the most part. And it's definitely something where, while there have been changes and there's been steps in the right direction, there's definitely been the opposite. And it's got to be something, as the creative director, of, dang, like, how do I maneuver in this space, and just get the people's eyes on your product?
Yeah, so as a creative director, my job mostly for the most part is to carry the vision of Unbreakable. So I my co-partners, Caroline and Jazz, always say, like, I'm literally the one who comes up with the vision, and I spearhead it, and so I'm kind of like almost the captain of the ship, if you want to put it that way. Um, and so, really, my goal is to make sure that we have a unified vision of what our goals are as both a platform, but also with our contributors, because I do value our contributors, and I do try to take some of their input when I can't, where it fits. And ultimately, that also entails like expanding the platform. So right now, a lot of my focus at this point has been trying to make sure that the platform is not only known about, but also the offerings are expanded. So that means expanding the monetary capabilities for our contributors, both past and future. And
Mhm.
so, the last I want to say year, I've been exploring like additional places where creators could gain potential revenue passively, so that way we can make sure that this entire experience is as lucrative as possible for our contributors. Because I knew one source of revenue was not going to cut it. I knew that from the get go. So but we needed this place to start first. So now my focus is making sure we can have other sustainable places to get additional passive revenue for our creators. And then also right now, I'm handling most of the social media for our account. Um, and so it is me wearing a lot of hats at this moment. Um, and navigating the space of Twitter is a minefield. um, it's more so to do with, it's not even trying to worry about what I say. It's more about the impact of what I say, because my regular Twitter account is I mean, I won't say like I have like hundreds of thousands of followers, but it's still an influential account. Myself as a person, I've grown to have some measure of influence. I don't know how. And and so I have to take responsibility for what I say and do, and it does require a lot of forethought, and it is not something that's like, oh, you're censoring yourself. Like, no, I'm trying to be responsible and make sure that when I say something, I mean it earnestly, and it doesn't sound like it's coming from a person who's very ignorant or arrogant. It is one of those things that I do spend more time reading what's going on in the community, more so than I usually will comment about it. But I do make an effort that if a statement needs to be said, I will say it.
Mhm.
And But most of the time, I always say that if there are people who can say it better than I can, I rather share their point of view and their threads than try to jarble it up and make myself sound not basically not carry the message right. So
Right.
I rather do that. So I'm more focused on making sure that the message is said correctly and accurately, as opposed to me trying to jumble it. And then for a lot of our marketing for Unbreakable, it has a lot to do with the fact that, Asian voices are usually very suppressed, or they're raced, or we're still dealing with racism, especially at this point in history, more. And also trying to deal with Orientalism as well. And it is sometimes a challenge. And and I will say I have gotten my fair share of interesting messages over time. But the important thing is that we want to make sure that our creators are heard, and that their stories are being heard. And
Mhm.
so I don't. It's not so much about me. It really has never been. It's really been more about the creators. That has always been my central focus. And um, so a lot of me also the last year has been me trying to establish contacts with media, and so that way we can make sure that we have connections for when we send press releases and updates and things like that. And also connecting with other networks or partnership with other people to help us spread the word, and provide. And I will say I'm very thankful that a lot of the work we've done has brought in people to be very supportive and help us grow successfully because of that. Um, and I know one of the things is, like, we're very good friends with the folks at Asian Represents, which is another
Mhm.
podcast. And they also do a lot of hard work when it comes to talking about the Asian experience and educating uh, about things like Orientalism. And because they had an Orientalist Adventures read through series. I'm a part of their Asian Reads Karator edition. So we go through Karator from AD&D era, We haven't gotten that far. We're like on page 20, I think, after like 7 sessions. So it is a thing, but like I will say that like having I think the thing is like understanding how important the work we do, and I'm grateful that so many other people understand the value of what we're giving and are very supportive to us about it.
Absolutely. And as coming from a person who had no clue about a lot of this stuff, especially uh, when I was role playing or even the past couple of years, the the work that has been put out and the education and just sitting back and learning and listening, like there have been times where I've been like, I went to a Kickstarter a couple months ago and I was like, wait a minute. There's no sensitivity readers, and this is it's not cool. Like how are you putting out some kind of work like this? And I was like, nope. But it's definitely something, especially with the Asians Represent podcast, is on the one on the one hand, dang, like that it is incredible to hear what has been published and what has been going on. But on the other hand, like I remember when like they took the break and I was like, I couldn't even imagine like the mental the mental work that's going into creating and talking about this stuff that is so affecting. And I'm just like it just it's just something where like I'm amazed on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm like, dang, like I don't like I just like there's no words at times on some of this stuff, and like some of the stuff just needs to go away, like that is continuously published and put out there.
Yeah, like, I think that, and that's one of the things too. When we get, I think one of the common criticisms we get about regarding our opinions about like Oriental adventures, right, is yeah, we understand. Especially like now they put in like this kind of like Warner Brothers esque kind of warning on it.
Hmm.
But the problem we have with it isn't the fact that there's no warning for it. It's you're still making profit off of it.
Right.
That's our problem with it. It has like if you chose not to have profit off of it, then and you just want to use and you want to keep it more as a timepiece, that's one thing. But you're literally making profit off of it, and that's at our expense. And so, that is why we have a problem with it. And you know, I know in our last episode of Karator Reads, we decided near the end that we're going to do a big world building episode to showcase like how we could build an entire like village or town that's an Asian esque setting, and we're going to basically try to do world building to showcase like what you can really do,
Hmm.
and and be meaningful about it. And so I'm really looking forward to when we start recording that one. But yeah, so I want to say that one of the most important things, like now, the especially with the dialogue change of now, especially for regarding like Kickstarters or projects, is like really looking into who's working on it, and like is there a diverse, inclusive like group of people working on it, and are there sensitivity reading done for it? Because like, and it is not even just like cultural sensitivity reading. You also have things for like content sensitivity, like dealing with things that could be potentially triggering for an audience. And especially in genres like horror, like
Hmm.
there's a minefield every time. But even in fantasy alone, there's also a lot of different potential topics that can be very triggering or very potentially harmful, and even portrayals that can be very harmful. One of the big ones was recently Wizards taking the time to kind of revise their portrayal of the Vistani in Ravenloft because of the fact that the Vistani were analog portrayals of the Romani people,
Hmm.
and they hired a Romani consultant to address those things and make amendments and release a better edition of it. And as we said before, David, like some places are trying to make the effort, a bit slow, and and then there are others who kind of disregard that entirely.
Yeah.
And and that's the thing about like the whole process is it's always going to be a work in progress. And I think the most important thing about the effort is that it needs to be genuine and it needs to be thoughtful, because there are times where you look at something and it still doesn't feel like as if it was like it wasn't something that was in the beginning of the forethought. It was definitely an afterthought.
Right.
And that's the thing. A lot of us, like we have spoken about on Asian Represents before. I wasn't in that episode, but they talked about like cultural sensitivity and consulting and things like that, and how really the reality is that that kind of work needs to kind of happen in different stages of the process and not just be an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the industry, you will see that happen more often as an afterthought, where it's like the writing has been done, the editing has been done, and now the sensitivity reading comes in. And at that stage, it's very difficult to suggest changes.
Right.
And so, like for Unbreakable, we have our stage kind of done more of there's a rough draft that's submitted by the writer and the editor at the same time. So basically, the editor has to approve the final draft, or at least the rough draft first. And then the sensitivity reader comes right in. So it's right after the very first rough draft. They go through it and kind of pick through it. And then they give them back a feedback on all the content. And then that way, when they do the revision, the writer is empowered with the feedback, and the editor can help them along with it, and therefore the process becomes a more of a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, you get a much better result in terms of the impact that the sensitivity reading is getting, and the final product you get prior to layout.
Absolutely. Like I always think back for the work that I do. They're always like, catch it in the front end. Catch it in the front end. Don't wait until like everything's done and then you have to spend a week or two doing something when you should have already done it like in the first month. And like as you're talking, I'm like, dang, like that's just, it needs to be how you've like worked it out with the rough draft, and having somebody look at it before it even gets to the part of like, okay, it's finished. Okay, somebody come take a look at it now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, still it is still mostly in a lot of cases that I've seen, it's still mostly like after editing, and I'm like, we're not going to be able to give you a whole lot of impact. Like we can
Right.
give you all these things, but you're not. But most likely, you're not going to make a lot of those changes, and it really basically almost nullifies the whole point of it. And plus, I've seen some creators who have done that where they now struggle making those changes, because then it alters so much of the content, and then they have to do a whole lot of extra steps of revision that basically extend the time for them to complete their projects.
Right.
And that is one of those things that, like, if you do when you and that is nothing you can do, because at that point it's like you either choose to keep all of your content that way, or you only make the smallest amount of minimal changes, which I've known some publishers have done that before. So it's like, and at that point you're just like, why did you bother?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, Jackie, we're recording in August. Your episode comes out the first week of October. What's on the deck for the remainder of your 2021 for you, like whether it be publishing or streaming, games, like what's on the tail end of this year and then into even next year for you?
Well, I will say for Unbreakable, we are planning to release more books. So by October, we should have some news about Unbreakable Pathways, which is another new anthology series we're running. So we just recently released Unbreakable Revolution, which is now out on DriveThruRPG, and Pathways is a different collection of stories dealing with family and traveling and food, specifically like food culture in other Asian cultures. So we are planning to have that anthology out hopefully by October, or at least news about a release date by then. And we also plan to release volume 2 and 3 of Unbreakable. So those will be D&D 5e anthologies. So those will more or less either come out at the tail end of 2021 or early 2022.
Anything for you on your horizon?
I do have a lot of projects. Unfortunately, a lot of them I can't talk about yet.
Right.
Unfortunately, even now I still can't talk about them. But I will say that I'm very looking forward to when people find out about all the wonderful projects I'm recently been a part of, or I'm a part of right now. Because I did not expect to be this busy in 2021. I almost haven't had a day off since January.
Oh my goodness. Well, I that sounds like a great thing to have, but then on the other hand, I hope you do, take a day
I
off
mean,
at some point.
I have a few breaks. I still take breaks, but like I would really like a solid like week of genuinely just doing nothing. So there's that. But I will say that I have a couple of collaborative projects that probably will be featured on the DMs Guild sometime around October already. And I want to say, I'm sure I'll write like an indie game for my itch page by then, because I need to have some creative outlet for myself, compared to all the work I do. So I'm sure I'll have something out by then. But I know as of right now, I have a few collaborative projects that will probably appear on the DMs Guild, and they're supposed to release around September or early October. So they should be out by then.
Okay. Now, for people that have listened to this episode, they're like, "Hey, I want to check out Jacky's work, or I want to check out Unbreakable." Where can people go to find you? Where can people go to find your work? Shout them out, and I'll make sure that the links are in the show notes. So that way, people can just click on them.
Sure. So you can always find me on social media on Twitter at Death by Mage. I am there all the time. I will probably most of the time always be frequently retweeting everyone else's projects because I love supporting my fellow creators a lot. So if I see anything cool, I always retweet it. So you'll probably see a lot of me doing that. But also if you want to follow Unbreakable Publishers, you can find us on Twitter at unbreakable_pub. And for a lot of my indie games, you can find me on deathbymage.itch.io. And that is where you'll find a lot of my indie games. Most of them are very experimental, or they're very much me having a weird fever dream. And also you can find Unbreakable on DriveThruRPG. If you just type in Unbreakable, we should pop up pretty quickly. And for the most part, also if you want to check out Lost Omens from Paizo for Pathfinder 2nd edition, you can easily find that on Paizo's website. It's for Lost Omens, Gods and Magic. And then if you want to, you can find me on DMs Guild. You can just type in, I think you can just type in my full name. So it'll be Jacky Leung, and it should pop in. And I will give you links, David, for those, because I have bit.lys that make it easy for everyone. But if you want to find a lot of my work, you can also check out deathbymage.card, CARRD.co. And that usually also has a lot of the links for all my places, including the channel that I stream on, which is All Nerds Here. I'm usually there on Sundays. Right now we are doing a story using an RPG system called Animon Story, which is basically my fever dream of living out pocket monster fantasy, with 90s eco activism and also some Final Fantasy Kingdom Hearts aesthetics in there as well.
Awesome. Well, I will have the links. If you're listening, I'll have the links in the show notes, website, and Facebook page, so that way you can click on them. And be sure to follow Jacky and Unbreakable Pub on Twitter. And I feel the same way, Jacky, especially on Twitter, because I find sometimes I'm retweeting so much. I'm like, I haven't said anything in like days. I need to make original content for myself, but there's so much good stuff to retweet.
Yeah, it is a truth, because the the space is full of wonderful creators, both new and upcoming, and you always end up finding something that you just go, oh my god, this is so new, I need to know more about this, and then you just end up sharing it and everything. So I'm very blessed that we live in a great time where there's a lot of up and coming indie creators, and that is just something that is very pleasant, overwhelming but pleasant.
Well, Jacky, I want to say thank you for taking the time to hang out with me and talk, Babylon 5 and Lupin, but most importantly, like the work that you do in the tabletop role playing game realm of of being in that space, and I've had an enjoyable time getting to listen to all of it today.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.